Hey everybody, it's Hobie Stocking here with a new twist on my monthly newsletter. I thought I would come to you live from my spacious Skywater Earth studio here and give you an update on the newsletter this month. So, what I wanted to do is talk to you a little about what happened to me a year ago. A year ago, I was arrested. I spent 36 hours in the county jail for peaceful disobedience against the Dakota Access Pipeline at Standing Rock. And so, under the advice of my attorney, I haven't been able to speak about this or write about it, but after being charged with a felony for endangerment by fire and explosive, rioting, criminal trespass, the good news is that all of my charges have been dropped. And these charges were very real in their effect, but not real in any sense that they were trumped up and without evidence. And the chilling purpose of these charges was to quell dissent. So grab a cup of coffee. I'll walk you through the newsletter here and give you a few opinions. I might get a little political today, but I'll tell you what it's like when we militarize our police and county police forces. So, also a year ago, I was in Houston. I was in Houston at a climate change conference, and we discussed the impact of warmer Gulf water temperatures, the vulnerability of Houston, rain bombs. Baton Rouge had just received 30 inches of rain, and the flooding potential in Houston. And now Houston has suffered the third 500-year storm in the last 3 years. So, someplace in this disaster, we are reminded that we are all in this together. I urge everybody to contribute to the recovery and effort with a charity of your choice, and all of those in Houston are in our thoughts today. And today we are, and for the coming future, all Houstonians. But the Red Cross and charities aren't going to save Houston alone. There's a lot of rebuilding to do. The figures are coming in at anywhere from 90 billion to 190 billion, making Harvey the most expensive disaster to face the United States. And it's going to take a long time, a lot of effort, and ongoing focus in order to be able to rebuild. Now, in an ironic and short-sighted twist to this event, and some people don't want to politicize it, but I've got to ask a question. Our climate denier and fossil fuel fool, Donald Trump, just 2 weeks ago, rescinded the regulations to have federal buildings built above flood levels. And at the same time, his budgets are proposing cuts to FEMA, which is responsible for the recovery effort, or at least the rescue effort, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Organizations, which help predict hurricanes, the EPA, which helps clean up pollution, as we've seen with respect to Houston, and HUD, which can give grants for rebuilding. So while we focus on the immediate problem of relief and the next task of rebuilding, I believe we also need to begin to focus on climate change. We are now seeing climate change and its costs in real time. So what's my arrest and Harvey got to do with each other? Well, the Dakota Access Pipeline is now operating and spewing out over a megaton of carbon into our atmosphere every week. We don't see it, it's invisible, but it's all around us, and we're using the air in our atmosphere as a sewer. And the effect is climate change. There's no doubt about this. And the change is coming at an increasingly fast rate. Now, in Minnesota, we're faced with another pipeline. It's called the Enbridge Line 3. And it's going to move the world's dirtiest Alberta tar sands oil across 200 Minnesota lakes, streams, and rivers. And move it to Wisconsin, where it's going to be refined. And that's going to dump another 2 megatons of carbon into our air every week. James Hansen, former NASA scientist, says that if we use all the tar sands oil, it is game over for the planet. That seems sort of dramatic, but after looking at the data and the evidence personally, I can say it's not an exaggeration. The problem is that once we put in pipelines, we tend to use them for 20 or 30 or 40 years. So the good news, on the other hand, is that we have solutions and alternatives. For example, Minnesota is on a path to 40% renewable energy. We live in the Saudi Arabia of wind in Minnesota on the western borders, and we're taking advantage of that. We're also a good state for solar. And now, both wind and solar are cheaper than coal. I just test drove my first electric vehicle, and I believe we can change the direction. But the key question behind Standing Rock, Houston, Harvey, Line 3 is a values question. Are we in this together? Do we really care about our fellow citizens in Houston? Does what happens to the least of us affect all of us? Or are we just in it for ourselves? Do we want to be held hostage for a few jobs by corporations like Enbridge Energy Transfer Partners, who profit off the pollution into our atmosphere and to benefit a few? It's not as though they could buy climate absolutions, but at this time, not a single fossil fuel or oil company has stepped forward with a major contribution to the Houston recovery effort. I'm a little tired of our corporations and our leaders denying climate change. If you've read this newsletter, I think you know where I'm at. I'm tired of them putting up walls and dividing us. From my standpoint, I think we should take the money that they want to build the wall with and use it to rebuild Houston. So you know my answer. So this month, I've got 5 posts for you here. I've got starting out with a post on Standing Rock, and you can see what it's like and understand how I got there and my personal journey. I've got another post about the change in climate, and it's probably the 2 most hard words to pronounce, but it's places I've been, the amygdaloids and Tarsog, which is a place in Greenland. I've got 3 posts on environmental messaging for my environmental colleagues. First is called The Poverty of Words. It deals with how we often miss the opportunity to connect nature in the words that we use when describing the environment. Another is called The Balance of Fear, Hope, and Action, and that's about balancing instead of scaring people, because when you're frightened or your fear is too high, you don't act. And the last one is 5 steps to having a conversation with a conservative. So thanks again for your support and your interest, and if you like what you see, please pass it on. I'll talk to you next month. Thanks.